Welcome back to Kitchen Conversations at the Georgia Club. My name is Rountree, Executive Chef, and as promised, we're going to demonstrate our recipe or our version of Butternut Squash Bisque. Traditionally, a bisque is thickened with rice, but in this case, because the butternut squash acts as its own thickening agent, we're going to eliminate rice altogether. So I'm just going to jump right into it. We got a lot of ingredients laid out, but I'll explain as we go through. And we'll have a type recipe for you as well in the end. Butternut squash has a very thick skin on it. So what I'm doing here, I'm just kind of like going to split it in half like you maybe would. Well, you wouldn't do it to a pumpkin, but you see the seeds on the inside. It has the same consistency and the same texture as a pumpkin would have. So our first step is to remove these seeds. And you can toast them just like pumpkin seeds too. They taste really good. That could actually be a good garnish for the soup. So what I'm doing is scraping out all the insides. So you're left with just the meat. And I'm going to oil these up a little bit and salt them. And when you roast them off in the oven, you want to roast them 350 degrees. You want to roast them so the skin side is up, just like that. And you're going to put a little oil on top just so it roasts nice and evenly. And it takes about 30 or 35 minutes. So to speed up the process a little bit, I've already done, this is the equivalent of 4 butternut squash, and I've just, you'll know when they're done when they're soft, and you can easily scrape the meat off the inside of them. So this is the cooked meat from 4 butternut squash, and we'll just reserve that over here in the meantime. Right now I've got a pan on high heat, and we're going to add just a little bit of oil. It's blended oil. And we have 2 julienne onions right here. You want to stir them around really good so that the oil coats all the onions and they're going to cook evenly as well. Also, which helps, a little bit of salt will bring out all the sugars in the onions. And that's the main reason we use onions in this soup, to sweeten it. You know, and sometimes people add a lot of sugar to things, but onions are so naturally sweet anyway that if you get them dark enough, you can kind of control how much sweetness you have in your final product. And this is going to take probably 10 to 15 minutes, because what you want to do is when they start getting color on them, you want to turn your heat down. And then just keep stirring constantly until they get golden brown. And you can do it as dark as you want to. You can do it as light as you want to. It just depends on how sweet you want it to be, how much brown sugar you want to add in the end. But what I like to do is get them as dark as possible. About 4 or 5 minutes has elapsed since we first started our onions, and as you can see, they're getting dark and caramelly in color. So, what we want to do, soups are all about layering flavors, and you'll notice that there's a lot of color on the bottom of the pan, so you want to pick that color up because that color is concentrated flavor. I have a cup of brandy right here, which again, it'll add a little more sweetness to it without adding sugar. And as always, be careful because it will flame up. And you'll notice we're using a wooden spoon. The reason is because you want to scrape the bottom of the pan to get all that flavor off of it, but also you don't want to scrape any metal like you would if you were using metal spoon. Metal on metal, you're going to get little bits of, I mean, you won't probably notice it, but there's a risk there. So, making any soups, wooden spoon is the best way to go. Now that the brandy has evaporated by about half, we're going to start adding our spices and our seasonings to it. And once again, we're just layering flavors. So first off, we have about a teaspoon of cinnamon, teaspoon and a half, I would say. Fresh ground coriander, which is about a tablespoon. About a half a teaspoon of chili flakes, tablespoon of fresh thyme, and 2 tablespoons of fresh sage. Okay. So I want to stir those around and let the heat from the pan kind of bring out the aroma from those and toast them a little bit. Again, as the brandy reduces further, you're going to concentrate the flavors of those spices and herbs too. And now that the brandy is, the French call it au sec, which means the pan is almost dry basically. We're going to add the cooked butternut squash in there. Stir it all together, make sure it's all nicely incorporated. You notice that too, I've got it on low heat right now. I just want it to kind of simmer a little bit. All the flavors to come together. Meanwhile, I'm going to add a little citrus to it. And citrus to me makes things pop, makes everything come together. So, 2 important elements of any citrus is the zest outside, which we're going to have just a zester right here, or a microplane. We're going to add a little bit of that to it. And you don't need a lot. For this quantity, I'm just going to use the zest of half of this orange. But I also find if you're using an orange or any other kind of citrus that if you add a lemon, it's going to make it taste more like an orange or more like a lime. Just that little bit of acidity helps bring out the flavors in anything you do. So the same thing with this, we're going to add about half. And then also, I'm going to use the juice of this orange as well. And once again, that'll help bring up some of the flavors from the bottom of the pan again. It's just a continued process of concentrating flavors, adding more ingredients, concentrating those, and you're just building from there. And now that, once again, all the liquid has nearly evaporated from the pan, I'm going to add some chicken stock, chicken broth. But you could use water too if you wanted to make it completely vegetarian. And I'm just going to add just enough to barely cover the ingredients. So it depends on how much yield you get from your butternut squash. And also, in the end, it depends on how thick your soup needs to be, or you want the soup to be. To me, I like it just thick enough to coat a spoon, and that way you can, you're able to, when you present it in a soup cup or in a bowl, you're able to put ingredients on top and the soup's thick enough to hold those ingredients. Makes for a nice presentation as well. In addition, we're going to add some cream, and just heavy cream or half and half works just as well. If you want to add a little milk, I don't recommend it highly just because it is thin, but I'm going to add about half a cup, just enough to make it a little extra creamy. The thing about cream, it mutes flavors if you add too much. I mean, it can add a nice richness to your soups, but it can also just completely erase any of the work you've done in the beginning. So a little bit goes a long way in my opinion. And finally, we want to add a little more acid, just once again to bring about all those flavors that we built. A little bit of sherry vinegar. You can also add, I mean, if you still have brandy, you can add a little splash of brandy at the end, just to give that last little kick of flavor. We're going to add about 2 tablespoons, not a whole lot. And then ideally we want this to simmer for about 5 to 10 minutes, just to let all those herbs get all their flavor out, all those spices to get their flavor out. And after we do that, we're going to take a break. I'm going to take this into the kitchen, put this into our blender and make it ultra creamy, extra smooth, and we'll be right back with the final product. We're back now that we've pureed the soup, and I had to add a little bit of more chicken stock to it because it was a little thick. You're going to have to adjust the thickness in the end, because it's always hard to tell what the final product is going to look like. And it's always hard to tell what the final product is going to taste like too. Even if you're following a recipe, there's always, I shouldn't say always, but a lot of the times you're going to need to adjust the seasoning at the end. So what we want to do is taste before we start adding any other ingredients to it. And right off the bat, I know it needs a little bit more salt. So I'm going to add, that's about a teaspoon of salt right there. And then I like it to be just a little bit sweeter. I don't want to add too much. The onions have done a good job at creating a good sweetness, but we want to add maybe about a tablespoon of brown sugar. If you don't have brown sugar, you can always add molasses or even honey. Brown sugar, of course, being just sugar and molasses mixed together anyway. Alright, as soon as it comes to a boil, we're ready to go. We're going to taste it one more time just to make sure. And it tastes good to me. There you have it. We'll have printed recipes for that, obviously, and we'll see you next time on Kitchen Conversations. Thank you.